Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Version 5.2 brought with it another really interesting change that not many have been talking about, and that is an increase to some transformative reactions damage. In this video, we'll see just how transformative these changes are with some super wacky teams and some ordinarily conducting teams. Now, as a quick refresher, what are transformative reactions and how do they work? Many reactions fall under this category, including Overloaded, Electro-Charged, Superconduct, Shatter, Swirl, Burning, Bloom, Virgin, and the notoriously great Hyperblow. Are you tired of all the predatory gacha games? Well, I've got the perfect game for you with today's sponsor, Corepunk. Corepunk is a unique isometric open-world MMORPG that fuses the best of MMORPGs, MOBAs, and ARPGs into one unforgettable adventure. Explore a seamless handcrafted world brimming with steampunk, cyberpunk, and fantasy influences. Play casually and team up with your friends to murder local goblins and steal their stuff, all while riding epic motorcycles with wolves. And lore enjoyers can rejoice because the story is fully voiced with over 350 quests, tackling mature and thought-provoking themes. But wait, if you're a sweaty PvPer, you can master the fast-paced MOBA-style combat where skill, strategy, and teamwork reign supreme to outwit, ambush, and murder other players. There's countless things to do in Corepunk. Choose from 6 unique classes at launch, with new ones added every month with 8 talent branches each and weapon specializations. It's got literally endless customization, and you can even craft your way to greatness to become the richest player in the world of Corepunk. Best of all, Corepunk has a buy-to-play model and a fair monetization system. Corepunk promises a level playing field for all players. Corepunk is already in early access, so be sure to smash that link down below to check it out. Huge thanks to Corepunk for sponsoring today's video. As for what affects transformative reaction damage, your character level increases the base damage, your character's elemental mastery, and finally, the target's resistance. It's important to note that transformative reactions don't scale off of bonus damage, crit, or the enemy's defense, making them scale much worse in the end game where you're able to tap into these multipliers more effectively. Now come hither version 5.2, where Hoyoverse decided to buff Overloaded, Electro-Charged, Superconduct, and Shatter damage. Notably, Swirl and the Dendro-related transformative reactions were not buffed, as none of those really needed much help except for Burning, but we don't talk about Burning. First of all, what were these super buffs that were conducted? They overloaded the following reactions. Overloaded now deals 37.5% more damage, Electro-Charged deals 66.666% more damage, Superconduct's damage literally tripled, and Shatter now deals twice the damage that it used to. It makes you wonder just how much terrible damage can these inflict upon our local friends. And if you take a look at the base damage of these reactions, it's admittingly not especially impressive. Some might say these buffs are lackluster. Fortunately though, Elemental Mastery increases the damage substantially, with 1000 Elemental Mastery making these reactions deal 533.3% of the base damage, leading to a massive base damage of 23,150 for Shatter. Yeah, by endgame standards, these numbers in isolation, even after the buffs, don't look very impressive. Still, my goal was to see if I could make these reactions work, and let me say, I've cooked up some wacky ideas, with a couple of them that actually really, and I mean really, surprised me. Let's start off with the least wacky and most obvious teams that benefited from all of this. A Shaverse team. For this team, I decided to build Fischl with Elemental Mastery to see how it would perform. In total, I managed to count 14 overloadeds across this fight, with the overloadeds doing a total of 382,711 damage. Now, I might have missed some overloaded instances, so if I did, do let me know down in the comments below. Anyway, in total, overloaded dealt 1,398,462 damage. So overloaded actually made up an impressive 27.4% of this team's damage output, with some of the overloadeds from Fischl going all the way up to 31,884 damage. It's no surprise to see it performing reasonably well here. If we compare it to how much this team would have done back in version 5.1 before the buffs, Overloaded would have done over 100,000 less damage, and this team with an EM Fischl improved by a non-negligible 8.1%.
Not bad, not bad.
Granted, this is with an EM Fischl, so a much larger improvement is to be expected because this is with EM Fischl. And to be completely honest, I'm not sure it's actually worth building Elemental Mastery on Fischl for this team over Crit, but alas, it is much more viable now to build her with Elemental Mastery for Overloaded specifically than it was back in version 5.1. Now, one important tip to make a team like this work is to try your best to have Pyro Aura on the enemy, so that way Fischl can reliably activate Overloaded. Fortunately, Xiangling applies so much Pyro that this ends up usually being pretty darn consistent. Interestingly, Overloaded actually has a 0.1 second cooldown on being triggered against one target, which means that having Electro on the enemy and then triggering Overloaded from the Pyro side is not an effective way for Fischl to trigger Overloaded. Surely we can be a little more creative than this, right? Since we need Pyro on the enemy in order to trigger Overloaded with Fischl, let's try this composition: Sucrose, Nahida, Xiangling, and Fischl. I was able to count 15 overloadeds, dealing a total of 496,088 damage in this rotation, which is actually very impressive. Given the massive elemental mastery buffs that Nahida and Sucrose provide, along with the ability to shred pyro resistance with the Viridescent Veneer, this team in my opinion demonstrates that a team with overloaded as a major component of its damage is more viable than it ever was, especially against targets that aren't knocked around all over the place. Granted, most of the damage dealt by this team was from other sources, and perhaps a crit-based Aggravate Fischl would do better here, but alas, that's not really the point of this video. And I've got one last Overloaded showcase for you all. How much can we make Overloaded do if we push it to its whale limits? $72,115 damage. With over 2,000 elemental mastery on Lisa, and against an enemy that suffers massive reductions to its resistance, we barely managed to squeak out something that resembles a nuke, despite the thousands of dollars in this account. Yeah, it's a bit of a dud, but at least it was mildly amusing. So we've gotten past what some might have referred to as the most explosive section, Overloaded. But what about Superconduct and Shatter? Well, I'm pleased to show you all this wonderfully bizarre team, consisting of the unbelievably wacky Dory, the less wacky Nahida, the ever so serious Rosaria, and our water boy Xingqiu.
あなたこの件はわかるかい？他許さない。パーディクト。モラをいただきますわ。はい。腕の見たところですの。はい。よいしょ。諦め。痛くしちゃうかも。私のお家に。はい。 モラをいただきますわ。いや雨描きがたし最ウル許さない。震えなさい。前がありますわ。はいはびこりなさい。これこそが知恵の面。歌よにパーフェクト。腕の出たところですな。モラをいただきますわ。覚えたわよ。知識をあなたに。震えなさい。前があるです。
We are witnessing the dawn of a new era, where Superconduct and Shatter now deal non-negligible damage. With such earth-shatteringly powerful numbers such as 13,569 for Superconduct and 37,692 for Shatter, we are shattering our expectations of what these once negligible reactions are capable of. Even more astonishingly, this team managed to take out our dragon-defying Capybara friend in 93 seconds, who has a colossal 5,240,419 hit points, which ended up being a very respectable 56,349 DPS. And that's even including the wasted time interrupting the Capybara's dance. Now, how much damage did Superconduct and Shatter do? Well, as far as I could tell, and I most certainly missed some instances of Superconduct and or Shatter, we triggered Shatter 6 times, thus dealing 226,152 damage, or 4.3% of this team's damage output. And Superconduct, well, I most certainly missed some instances, but let's just say it wins a participation trophy. Clearly, Hyperbloom is still king for a team like this. Shatter is especially unique and neglected by Hoyoverse because unlike other reactions which have text that indicates those reactions occurred, Shatter is so unloved that it actually gets no text saying that Shatter even happened. So yeah, I guess each individual instance of Shatter now deals a non-negligible amount of damage, but given the impracticality and inconsistency of it due to most relevant enemies not even being freezable, it's something not to build around. This Dory Fridge Hyperbloom team, though, has Dory built with Elemental Mastery regardless for triggering Hyperbloom, so you can see this as an almost non-negligible buff to her damage output. Now, I actually think Diona is a bit better than Rosaria here for the Elemental Mastery, but I wanted Rosaria to test Shatter more so than Hyperbloom, due to Rosaria's much higher rate of cryo application, as well as her Constellation 6 shredding 20% physical resistances. But I digress, let's move on. Okay, so I did give another Shatter team a try, and this is a pure Elemental Mastery Albedo. And the reason why this works is because Geo damage automatically triggers Shatter, and because there's no ICD on his elemental skill, this means that we can more reliably trigger Shatter via his elemental skill when we freeze an enemy, but unfortunately it's still Shatter, and the frequency of which is a big issue. And despite the impressive 30k or so shatters that he can do, you're just better off making Albedo do actual Geo damage. Unfortunately, I didn't get around to trying a Kave team, but he can benefit a little bit from the Shatter buff as well. Alright, now as for Electro-Charged, I already tested this one out in my Auroron video, and I'm pleased to inform you that Electro-Charged teams are now a bit better. But ironically, unlike Overloaded and even Superconduct and Shatter, it's very difficult to have a consistent activator for Electro-Charged. Honestly, I can't even tell how much Electro-Charged is doing because these teams just have a million numbers by default. Oftentimes, Xingqiu will activate Electro-Charge, and it's pretty ill-advised to be building him with Elemental Mastery. But considering it probably deals roughly an average of around 8,000 damage per tick twice per second if you have some characters built with Elemental Mastery, with, I don't know, perhaps 70% uptime, I'd estimate this to be around a 4,500 increase in DPS, which is actually pretty reasonable. We can see that with my previous 4-star only Auroron Abyss 12 team, Taser is still very functional and capable. Sorry, I wish I could provide a better analysis like the previous reactions, but alas, I really can't see what's going on, and since I can't tell blue from purple due to my Deuter anomaly, it makes this nearly impossible for me to tell what's going on. Interestingly, all these buffs do make some of these wackier and also lower budget transformation reaction teams more viable. I was particularly impressed with Elemental Mastery Fischl's Overloaded's performance, as even an overloaded focused Fischl team is much more viable than it used to be. Overloaded in particular is more viable than I expected, largely due to being much more reliable when it comes to choosing who the owner of the reaction is with proper team setups. So yeah, again, we have another big W for Fischl this patch. And unironically for Xiangling as well, since she's the best at maintaining that pyro aura for Fischl to Overloaded. Granted, these overloaded teams are far from what I would describe as meta, but you can't deny that they have been improved. As for Superconduct and Shatter, well, the reactions themselves are still memes in my opinion, and it's hilarious to me that the best driver of these reactions happens to be the meme character Dory, at least the best character I could find. So yes, I did omit Freminette because you don't build Freminette with Elemental Mastery, which means he's not really going to do any damage with Superconduct or Shatter. But I'm sure many of you much more creative individuals will come up with many more wacky and wonderful ideas. And this video is mainly to inform you of the actual changes and to provide you all with some inspiration to start conducting some super earth-shattering research into overloading Genshin Impact with transformative reactions. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.